Now with an aquarium, if you don't have corals or live plants, then the less the lights are on, the cleaner your fish tank will stay. So a tank like this one, if you start getting algae in the aquarium, if you reduce your light time, you will pretty much reduce your algae, because there's no real reason why you need the lights on besides you like looking at them. And it will depend on how much residual light the situation gets. And this one here is probably not going to get any direct sunlight. So therefore you've got a fair bit of control over how much algae you get. And if you start getting algae in the tank, there are various things you can do. Get more catfish that eat the algae, or just turn your lights off for a period of time. In a blackout period, there'll always be enough residual light to be okay for the fish. But if you reduce the light, you will actually reduce the algae. So now there's no ammonia in this aquarium. And because this aquarium has just been overhauled, there is a little bit of nitrite. So what we're going to do is put the equivalent of like a teaspoon of this in every day. And then what that's going to do is just detoxify the nitrite. If we get ammonia, it'll also detoxify the ammonia. So putting at least a teaspoon, anything up to about, say, 5 teaspoons of this per day is going to help bind up the ammonia and nitrite and make it not toxic. Now, I've also brought some good bacteria, which I'm going to put into the back of the aquarium here. And that good bacteria should do quite a good job for instantly getting, or very quickly getting rid of the nitrite. I've also brought some amtrite down, which will help to grow good bacteria and help to get rid of the nitrite. Now, the GH of this water is basically 0. So I definitely need to raise this. So what I'll just do is tip that in. And then I will tip this in. And then before we leave, we'll try and take another GH reading. And considering the level is quite low, I think I'm actually going to need to bring it up further. And because the tank is relatively new, and because there is a little bit of nitrite in the water, I'd actually rather the GH on the high side than the low side. Now, the KH is about 1. So if the KH gets to 0, that's a problem. Now, I don't want the KH too high, because I don't want the KH being a buffer for the pH. Because the tank is new, there's a chance of getting ammonia. And ammonia will be more toxic if the pH is high. So I'd rather the KH be on the low side at the start, and I'm happy for the GH to be on the high side at the start. So if I just tip a little bit of this in there, and then later on I'll monitor it and see how that went. So now we're going to put the fish in. The fish are going to disturb all this sediment. So the water's going to go quite cloudy. The filter will have an opportunity to pick up a lot of that cloudiness. And away we go. Now when the tank evaporates, and it is amazing how much a tank evaporates, and evaporation is not a water change. Water has to actually be coming out of the aquarium, and then you're replacing it with new water for that to be considered a water change. So you can't just say, oh, I've put in 1,000 litres and I did a water change. No, if you put 1,000 litres in, you just topped it up. That is not a water change.
1,000 litres? That's a lot.
Yes, for well, it's a big tank, isn't it? Hey, buddy.
How much do you reckon this tank could hold?
I reckon about 4,000. Now I'm adding to the system some very cured marine pure, which would have lots of good bacteria in it already from the shop. And I'm also adding some good bacteria, because what we want now is the good bacteria to grow, and then the good bacteria is able to break down the waste from the fish. And if we don't have enough good bacteria to break down the waste from the fish, then the waste from the fish can cause a problem. But if we can get plenty of good bacteria in the system, the good bacteria breaks down the waste from the fish, and we've got nice healthy fish. With these fish freshly introduced into the aquarium, the most common problem that you're ever going to have, particularly with a new aquarium, particularly with new fish, tends to be white spot. Now, white spot is a very common parasite and it's very easy to treat. So if you treat the tank for white spot, then generally it'll fix it very quickly. So it's really worth having white spot cure on hand, because the way white spot cure works is you got to get in as fast as you can. And Murphy's Law basically says that you'll never need white spot cure until you can't get it. So either it's out of stock, or you're about to go away on holidays, or there's some reason why it's just inconvenient or impossible to get. Now, if you have white spot cure on hand, somehow you'll just never need it. If you don't have it on hand, somehow you'll need it when you're about to go away, or some other time that you just wish you never needed it. And if you see the fish flicking a lot and scratching and looking uncomfortable in the water, then that would be a sign of white spot. Or if you see little spots on the actual fish that weren't there before, like little white spots, then obviously that would be a sign of white spot. So if you see white spot, the first thing you want to do is up your salt, and you want to get the medication in there as fast as you can, and then you should really be able to fix it. If you go leaving it for several days or a week, it tends to just get worse and worse and worse, and then you can actually start losing fish. So it's not worth losing fish for something that's so avoidable, by number one, being able to tell if they've got it, and then being able to treat it straight away. Now, this aquarium has polyfilter in the filter, and polyfilter is basically God's gift to fish tanks. It will adsorb and absorb anything impure out of the water. So that means that if you were going to treat the aquarium for white spot, or you're going to treat it for any sort of medication, you do need to remove the polyfilter from the filter, because the polyfilter will polish the white spot cure out of the tank, therefore making it obviously useless. And the polyfilter goes in the filter. It starts out white, it'll change color according to what it's removing, and then when it's finished it'll turn to black.
It's your own kind.